My entitled sister. Can't stop lying. So I, 27M, have a sister who's a few years older than I am. I'm not sure how old she is now, as we have as little contact as possible. For as long as I have been alive, I can say that she is responsible for 99% of the problems my family and I have had. I have 2 brothers and a mother. My father was an alcoholic who drank us out of our first home. A story for another day, I guess. But due to that, we moved in with my grandparents. Well, that is except for my sister, who moved in with her godmother for reasons at the time I was completely unaware of. It turns out my nan had already figured out what she was like and didn't want her in her home. I am the youngest of my siblings. My brother, 28M now, is so heavily disabled mentally that he was the constant target of abuse from every kid he came into contact with. My eldest brother and I were always being attacked because we were simply related to him. But he can't be blamed, as apart from school and the odd trip down to the local warren with my other brother and myself, never left the confines of our grandparents' garden. I was talking to my sister about it one day. I was about 6 or 7 years old at the time. I mentioned how the only good thing was that they simply didn't know where we lived. Little did I know that was a mistake. The next day she showed up with over 20 of the worst kids and led them into the front garden, which was surrounded by trees and an 8-foot-tall hedge, and loudly called my brothers and me out. We very rarely saw my mother, as she slept in a tent in the front garden and was out all day every day working to get us our own home again. As such, my 80-year-old grandfather went out to see what was going on. When he saw that they not only began tearing up plants and breaking garden furniture, my nan and I used to spend my days off of school planting flowers and looking after the garden, so this pissed him off. They also took everything they could out of the tent my mother lived in. They then began squaring up to my grandfather, and one even pushed him. It was at this time my older brother, now 31, appeared as if from thin air. He's always been on the heavy side, but he sent these kids scattering with ease. I don't think they even hurt him. Then began a standoff between them at the garden gate as they threw stuff at us while we waited for the police. The entire time my sister, who couldn't have been more than 13 at this time, was leaning on the wall across the road smoking, laughing, and shouting for them to just jump the gate and get in the garden again. This ultimately ended up with kids coming to our home daily, running in the garden, stealing things. Quite a few times, I'd be sitting there with my disabled brother chatting, and kids would just run into the garden and start beating us black and blue. My sister's laugh was always close by. If you were lucky, my eldest brother would respond, but if he wasn't there, we would just have to sit there and take it until my gamps would shout at them. He even started keeping walking sticks he didn't need by the front door, just in case he needed a weapon. She would also regularly call my mother and tell her that my brothers and I were out breaking windows and stealing from shops. As I mentioned earlier, there was a good few years where we saw her maybe a handful of times a month. And due to us being poor and my sister stealing from her godmother, even after she passed away, she was the only one with a phone. I can't say about my brothers, but due to her influence I had no friends in school, and my older brother having severe anger issues meant that apart from my cat and my grandparents I was completely isolated. So when my mother would appear and begin to scold me for things that hadn't happened, only things made things worse for me. It took me years to get over the thought that I wasn't good enough for anyone and just caused problems wherever I went. She also began lying about being attacked and bullied in school, leading my mother to stop working and run to her side in school. This would not be the last time she lied about things of this nature. My grandfather passed in 2014, so I moved in with my nan to look after her. After a year, my sister offered to move in with the kid and her boyfriend if they could stay in the house after she passed. My nan agreed. As stated before, my nan and sister hated each other. It was only a matter of time before she split with her baby daddy. She came to live with my mother and I, and this began the worst year of my life. We eventually got a new home, and my sister refused to move in with us, staying instead with a family friend, which I don't remember having an opinion on at the time. I simply didn't want anyone to notice I was alive, let alone put forward an opinion. And my mother came home one night over the moon that she had made 100 pounds. I don't remember how, but she said we would go out the next day as a family and have fun. My mother woke us the next day and couldn't find her purse that she kept by the front door. We spent the next 5 hours tearing the house apart looking for her purse. Then my sister walked in and asked why the house was turned upside down. When my mother told her, she began to help look for the purse for about 30 seconds before finding it. She claimed it was on the table by the front door. The table at this point was in the living room and in many pieces, as I had taken it apart to see if it had fallen down the back of the drawers. My mother took the purse off of her to find no money in it. When she asked where the money had gone, my sister replied, "OP probably took it. He's always been a little thief," and walked out the front door. My mother, for many years before and after this, believed everything my sister said as gospel. So while my brothers stood up for me, it was no use and I was punished. A few weeks later, I was painting some Warhammer at home when the house phone rang. It was my mother. She claimed my sister was a few minutes down the road and had just been attacked. My mother asked that I run down and take care of her and bring her home. So I did. I took off sprinting as any good brother would do. I was an Army cadet at this point, so made it there in maybe 3 minutes. She was leaning on a garden wall smoking and began shouting abuse at me for not being our mother. She then punched me in the stomach and began walking towards my home. After getting my breath back, I followed. She hid herself in the kitchen and I sat down at the folding table I had set up by the front door to paint some more Warhammer. I don't know why, but she pulled me out of the chair I was sitting in, kicked the table over, and pinned me to the wall by my throat and began screaming at me. I can't remember what she said, only that I was terrified. Being 11 or 12 years of age, I didn't know how to react, and her arms being longer than mine, I couldn't reach her to help myself. My mother walked in through the front door and she dropped me, claiming I was trying to attack her. My mother believed her tears and I was sent to my room. None of my Warhammer models survived. Looked like she stamped on them afterward. My eldest brother Steve was also an Army cadet and was perhaps the happiest he would be till he met his now life partner. He had a group of friends and my sister failed multiple times to turn them against him, going even so far as to join the cadets herself to try and turn them against him. When all else failed, she claimed that one of the group had RAP'd her. Nothing came of it, as he was halfway across the country with my brother at the time it was supposed to have happened. Either way, my brother, being a good brother, decided to believe his sister, and many of his friends went their separate ways. This is not the last time she would claim someone RAP'd her. My mother has several debilitating disabilities and thus had a drawer in her room filled with prescription painkillers. My eldest brother had moved out a few months prior, and I began getting flash headaches. A blinding light for a second, and then hours of throbbing pain. Thought I had a brain tumor. Turns out it was a trapped nerve, and I'm fine, lol. But after a few weeks of pain, I finally asked my mother if I could have some painkillers to help me sleep. She of course let me. The next 7 years, I would be routinely asked why I was taking so many pain meds. I always told her I wasn't after the headaches were fixed, I did not need them. But they kept going missing. Pots full of them at a time in some cases. And being as only my disabled brother and I lived at home, it was easy to blame me. Eventually, my brother got moved to his own flat on disability, and it was just my mother and I at home. And for a while things were good. I'd cuddle my now old black cat, named Baggers, and watch TV with my mother. My sister got with an amazing man who I love very much and moved in with him. This wasn't new, as she was moving from one man to the next as soon as the family friend kicked her out at 18. But he stuck around longer than usual. My mother told me one day that she may be splitting up with him and was quite upset about it, as she too really likes him. The next month she got pregnant. When I went out for a drink with her boyfriend, he got really pissed and confided that he didn't understand how it could happen. She was on the pill, and he always wore a condom. She now has 2 kids with him, and they are separated. It was shortly after that she claimed a man she was working for was sexually assaulting and raping her on a daily basis and got the police involved. Of course, they found no evidence but turned my nan's house into a fortress, welding plates over the letter flaps, setting up cameras, and reinforcing all the doors and windows. This drove my nan insane, saying that she lived in the house since it was built over 60 years ago and had never felt scared. Probably because my granddad was a beast of man, but you never know, lol. The man she claimed did all of this is her new current boyfriend who looks after her kids. See, told you I'd post TikTok fams. I was working from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. in a warehouse as a janitor. I was a supervisor with one team of 2 doing the work of 10, except my staff didn't do the job, and all my complaints fell on deaf ears, meaning I had to come in early and finish late to get all of the work done. Not so bad. I could always come home after 13 hours of work and sleep, right? Wrong. My sister moved the kids in with her, and every day would wait for me to get home, wait for me to settle in bed, then kick my bedroom door open and throw my now awake nephews at me. This went on for 6 months, getting maybe 2 hours of sleep every 2 days, and cycling an hour and half to and from work didn't help either. About 3 months and my mother met who I now call my stepdad. I love this man, a mechanic, farmer, carpenter, you name it, he can do it type of guy. Turned our back garden from a patch of mud into a place to sit in the sun. Sheds, decking ponds, you want it, he made it. And just like my nan, he figured her out immediately and from day one was defending me. I lost my job at the warehouse and was working part-time as a barista and looking for an exit door for my life, when an old friend contacted me from South Ireland. Look, Opie, I know you lost your job and you're going through a lot right now. I've got a job and I've got a bed for you. We'll pay for your ticket, just get over here. And with a day, maybe 2 considerations. I took him up on the offer and his brother came over to collect me. I was there maybe a week before my mother phoned me crying her eyes out. Turns out that after I left, she lived alone with my stepdad. Her pills kept going missing, so she set up a trap. She bought a safe and put all her remaining pills bar 1 bottle in it. She knew my sister was dropping by, and when she went to use the toilet, she took the pot. As my mother went up after she had left and finally knew I was innocent. 7 years of suspicions and arguments, driving a wedge between my mother and me. It opened her eyes, and in turn, I opened up. I bombarded her with every single problem I have ever had. Every time she punished me for her lies or her stealing things. 20 years of hate poured out of me, a bit like here now I think about it. The only thing I never understood was why she always made me her target. I once told someone that I had great instincts and knew if a person was a bad person simply by looking at them. And to this day, I've never been wrong about a person. And when I talk about my sister, people often ask, do you have that ability because of her? Is it that you see aspects of her in people, and that's why you instinctively hate them? And if so, I can thank her for one thing at least. Sorry for the ranting of this. It was only going to be a small rant, but once I started, I couldn't stop. The pain and suffering she has brought to not only me but my family. Even my saint of a grandfather who loved everyone hated her. And that takes a lot. I thought the man incapable of hate. But as I sat and listened to him in his final months, he proved me wrong. And now to the next story, story 2. Travel Plaza Drama. So this is the first time I'm posting something anywhere. I signed up to Reddit years ago, but never really figured out what to do with it. Though as I was struck by sharing and semi-entitled small interactions I had at a previous job of mine and seeing how folks react. Normally I write fiction, but I'll try nonfiction for once. Anyway, from the end of graduating high school to a few years after graduating college, about 5 years during and after community college with a 1 or 2 year break for university, I worked as a porter for one of those interstate travel plazas you see where truckers and travelers stop to get gas and eat. My job there mainly consisted of cleaning and sanitation. The usual stuff like cleaning the bathrooms, mopping up spills, taking out the trash, and answering customer questions if asked. Often one of the most common questions was, "Where is the bathroom?" A standard question if ever there was one. But the people surprised me in a few cases, with one guy asking how to get out of the bathroom at one point. I can recall the time some guy even asked me where the door was to get out of the building when he was standing in front of it. There I go again, rambling on like usual, but this was just a preface to some of the strangeness I've seen at that place. Now from the strange to the entitled, I have 4 short stories of entitled customers I encountered while on the job. Stop the water, I refused to pay for it. I forget what year it was, but I do know it was shortly before COVID. I was minding my own business, just sweeping out the lobby when along comes this man over to me and asks if I knew there was a skin running nonstop in the men's bathroom. I knew what he was talking about immediately, as since the building was renovated cheaply, Some of the fixtures and such had a tendency to fail. For example, the AC unit caught fire twice. Anyway, this sink had been running nonstop for weeks. The second one to do so, actually. But this man wanted me to turn off the water. I told him I didn't have the ability to. He then wanted me to get a manager, so I did. As I was walking off, the man said to me that he was a taxpayer and that he didn't want to waste his money paying for a water bill in a town he didn't live in. I knew that he was just looking for an excuse to complain, as the plaza paid for its own water and taxes had nothing to do with it. I got the manager and went on my way. Not sure what happened after that, as I had outside trash to attend to, but it was weird. I'm not sure if this first story goes here, but the following three certainly do. My pizza slice is cold. So the Travel Plaza used to have a pizza parlor that was shut down due to lack of staffing. It lay empty during COVID and opened up again afterward. Wanting to move up, I volunteered to work in it, with the promise of becoming a supervisor if I proved myself. Though about 4 days later, the manager hired someone who worked at a pizza shop before as the supervisor. For a while, it was just me, the supervisor, her boyfriend, and an older man. We made the pizzas from scratch. Admittedly, we struggled to roll out the frozen dough sometimes. After making the pizzas, we would put them out on display and warm them up for customers. Now, to heat up a slice would take about 5 to 9 minutes. And this one woman comes up and asks for a slice of cheese and a slice of pepperoni. I put both in the oven for the same amount of time and put them on a plate when they are ready. About 1 minute later, the woman returns and says that her slice of cheese is stone cold. I'm thinking to myself, how? I just gave it to you. I handed her 2 warm slices that were warming next to each other for the same amount of time. How could one be hot and the other be cold? Not wanting to argue or get fired, I simply heated the slice up for her again. In my mind, I was tempted to reply to her with an insult like, "If you want to warm up your slice, then hold it in front of your mouth while you talk. I'm sure that hot air you exhale is higher in temperature than my oven." Again, this was in my head, as I'm too polite to say something like that to a person's face. You can't check my money. No one counterfeits $5s and $10s. Now, this one I feel was set up by some greater power. I'm serving another customer about a month or two after the cold slice story. She says that she wants to pay with cash and a card. At the time, I was still slightly unsure of how to use some of the register's functions, as it was an outdated system with way too many buttons and options for foods we didn't carry. It was so outdated that you needed a manager to come and swipe their card so you could void an item they changed their mind about. Me being me, didn't know how to do hybrid payments, as they are a bit rare. I thought you could only do cash or card, and asked the woman politely which she would like to do. With a huff, she said she would go back to her car and get cash. Just as I was wondering why she didn't just pay with a card if she didn't have enough cash, one of the managers on duty came along and told me to be careful, as someone tried to pass a counterfeit $50 dollar bill at one of the other 2 counters. Taking that to my mental vault, I was going to keep an eye out. The woman then came back with a $5 and $10. So, having just been informed of the warning, I put the $10 up to the light and checked for the telltale watermark. The moment I put it up to the light, the woman starts to raise her voice at me, asking why I had the nerve to check her money. I tried to explain my reasoning, but she didn't follow the logic and just said, "Nobody counterfeits 5s and 10s. By that point, I was overwhelmed, as she was demanding to see the manager. Thankfully, either one of my coworkers must have heard the commotion and brought the manager over. He told me to go in the back. I was worried that I was in trouble, as that was the first time I encountered an aggressive customer. Thankfully, my manager reassured me that it wasn't my fault after the woman left. Looking back, I can kind of see where she's coming from, but think about it. Larger bills aren't the only thing counterfeiters print. People are more likely to pass smaller bills than large ones, as things like 5s, 10s, and 20s are rarely checked. Who's to say whether or not such a thing could happen? I don't care if the line is long. You gave us an incomplete order, and we want our money back. So about maybe 6 or 7 months after the pizza place reopened, the big bosses of the plaza decided that we weren't making enough dough. I know, it was a cheap pun. Complaint forms are available in the comments below. That, coupled with the lack of proper training and the fact that the managers were too focused on the coffee shop and the fast food counter, ensured that the place would be emptied out again. Everyone was transferred over to the fast food counter, and I was assigned to the prep line where I placed the orders into bags. Though this was after COVID and the restrictions were lifted and everyone seemed to pile in. I remember it was early September on a weekday where we had a sudden rush of families with kids coming through, and I wondered why the children weren't in school. Though as I was making the orders that came one after another, one group called me to the side and told me that I made their order wrong and that I was missing a sandwich. Looking at the order, I saw that they were short of a sandwich and offered to get it once it was ready, but I had other orders to fill. Though they wouldn't wait as they claimed to be in a hurry, and either they got their sandwich or they wanted a refund. I tried to get the cook to make a new burger, but they were too busy to hear me. Eventually, the group demanded the manager and insisted they get a refund. They didn't care that the line was long. They wanted one of the registers to stop handling customers and to get their money back. So that's what happened. The rest of the day was a blur, and I was placed to work at the grill and fryer after that. Now I found a new job about a month or so later, as I recall, not the best with dates, as I was getting tired of getting the runaround from the plaza's ever-rotating roster of managers and moving up the ladder. Last time I visited the place, the coffee shop closed down and the pizza place was replaced with a donut shop and a smoothie/ice cream shop. I like where I work now as everyone there is friendly and the customers are more sensible. Save for the one who stole some cigarettes but was stupid enough to be wearing work clothes and driving his work truck, but that's a story for another. Trust me, this stuff was tame compared to what I went through during my high school job. If you liked my 4 short stories and want to hear more about the nightmares of my first job, let me know in the comments. Hopefully my first post was entertaining enough.